This podcast is brought to you by Sabio, a leading CTV advertising platform purpose-built to help brands effectively reach, engage, and validate streaming audiences. For over a decade, Sabio's platform has combined deep industry expertise with innovative technology to meet the needs of an evolving media landscape. At the core of Sabio's offering is its proprietary DSP and a unique 70 million app-based household graph designed with a diverse lens. Trusted by marketers looking to harness the power of CTV and tap into diverse consumer markets, Sabio delivers impactful campaigns with data integrity and measurable results. Ready to unlock the power of CTV advertising and embrace the future? Learn more at sabio.ws/podcast. That's sabio.ws/podcast. Welcome to the Marketecture Podcast. We have an exciting episode today. We're going deep on healthcare. We have Chris Paquette, the CEO of DeepIntent, which is a specialized DSP that focuses on pharma and healthcare. I'm very interested in hearing about this. We had a great Monopoly Report podcast this week with Megan Gray, where we went into a lot of depth on whether TikTok will be banned. And the law says it will, but the candidates for president don't want to talk about it, and no one really wants to talk about it. So it's going to hit us one way or another in January, and Megan takes us through all the mechanisms, the court cases, etc. I'd highly recommend checking out the Monopoly Report podcast and subscribing to that. Next week, I will be at the IAB Tech Lab in London. So if you're in London listening to this, say hi next Thursday, and I might be around for a pint or two. You know how it works in London. All right, Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Ari, thanks for having me. And Eric, good to see you.
How are you doing, Chris?
Am I your first guest who's not at about.com?
First in a couple of weeks, yeah. It's an ongoing joke. We're recording on Halloween. Either of you guys have exciting Halloween plans? Chris, you're down in Miami. Do you do Halloween in Miami, or is it too warm?
We do. I have a 2.5-year-old, and we started this thing where we started watching classic movies. We bought a projector, and we threw on Wizard of Oz, and now she's going to be the Tin Man. So I'm pretty excited for that.
That's a good one for a homegrown costume. Just like take some stuff out of the recycling bin, and suddenly you have a costume.
40-gallon drum or something. Yeah.
All right.
Terry Kawaja outed my Halloween costume. He posted a picture of me as John Wick on the internet this week.
Oh, is that it? How do you do John Wick? You just put on a coat?
Yeah.
All right, that sounds low. That's a low work costume. I'm going to go as Zach Galifianakis, which means I'm just going to walk out of the house and it'll be fine. Okay.
With a satchel.
All right, Chris, why is healthcare and pharma different from everything else?
Yeah, no, it's a really great and important question. So maybe just to back up a minute, healthcare, right around the same time that I think advertising had this like digital renaissance and programmatic, there actually was a pretty big renaissance that happened in the healthcare space. So just a quick backtrack to, 2009, 2008, Obama, believe it or not, I mean, he instituted or had this part of the High Tech Act. And at that time, if you can believe it, less than like 10% of healthcare providers actually use electronic health records, right? So part of the High Tech Act actually pushed healthcare providers and hospitals to actually start digitizing their healthcare records. And you probably have noticed over the last decade or two, more of your digital health data is now able to be accessible through all these applications. Epic has a big application. There's all these different companies. So there's been this huge digitization within the healthcare industry. And with that, there's a lot of opportunities to build applications, right? Once that data becomes online, you can do things like machine learning, pattern recognition, right? You'd be able to build applications that are truly data driven. So, while we in the programmatic advertising world had this huge RTB, right? Programmatic advertising, data driven kind of Cambrian explosion of different technologies. In the healthcare side, it was very much going through the same type of renaissance. And, where we kind of came into the picture was in 2015, we recognized that to do healthcare marketing correctly, right, to do it with precision, obviously it's unlike all the many other categories in healthcare. There's certain nuances about healthcare that whether it's market complexity, regulations, and specialized systems and processes that just really require you to have a specialist platform to do it at the peak that you can get for performance. So
what sort of data is available? Because you have HIPAA, You have even the NAI self-regulatory guidance has sensitive categories. So what sort of data is available for healthcare marketers?
Yeah. So, obviously all the data, most patient level data, actually all patient level data is covered under HIPAA, right? So using that data is, it's federally regulated. And there's a lot that goes into making sure you're compliant with federal law. And then now you see a lot of state law that's coming into the picture as well. But that said, there are, things like data points like medical claims data, which, very similar to maybe the ad tech industry, has a lot of middle, like basically aggregators. Like think of them back as like the parallels are actually kind of crazy. Like ad networks are kind of like these like clearinghouses, like it's kind of the analog. And they aggregate all these claims data, which think of them as maybe like RTB requests, right? And they're aggregating these things. And then what they're doing is they're de-identifying it and then basically selling those off, right? As insights and as actually raw record level data. So yeah, you have this kind of like parallel world that in many ways feels like the ad tech world back in like the earlier days. And it's pretty exciting.
I think a lot of people just hear HIPAA and they freak out and just say like, I don't want to touch that. Is HIPAA a blanket restriction from using any data? Like, is it just an absolute no, or does HIPAA just require more processes?
Yeah, it requires more processes to do it right. And actually a feature of HIPAA, basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to protect from re-identification, right? There's a lot of insight and important insight within that health data that's used for both medical research and, improving healthcare delivery, and also for use cases like marketing. There's actually a part of it called expert determination, where you have an outside statistician come in and certify that what you're doing has a very low risk. That's a statutory requirement for re-identification. It's pretty much near impossible to re-identify any one individual using their health data that you're working with.
The second question I had is you made a distinction between the healthcare provider and the claims. They're both under the same HIPAA restrictions. It's just that the claims provider has more scale. Is that a way to think about it?
Yeah, healthcare. I mean, and you guys have been to the doctor presumptively, so you guys know how it works, right? You go to the doctor and then the doctor sends a request to the insurance or the payer. That data point, right, that basically that payment request is in the form of a claim, and that goes to the payer. There's aggregators that kind of simplify that connectivity and these like central points. I mean, there's many different parties in the healthcare data ecosystem, but yeah, these aggregators exist to kind of collate all that data and then process those claims.
So if it's de-identified, what is it useful for? Is it by zip code or something like that?
Yeah, you can look at it by zip code. There's also new technologies that provide these like pseudonymous IDs as well. So there's like these tokenization companies that will take PII and convert them to a pseudonymous ID that then can be linked to other pseudonymous IDs. And that's where obviously when you talk about re-identification, that's where a lot of risk comes in. And that's where you have to make sure you have this certification. It's pretty rigorous. I mean, there's every use case that we have goes through like a multi-factor analysis that basically certifies that you can't re-identify any of those individuals when you link all these data points together.
From the marketer's perspective or the agency's perspective, what are they looking to target?
Yeah, it's a great question. So most of our use cases that we see are large pharma companies, right, that have, treatments and trials. So whether it's a clinical trial or some sort of drug or product that helps patients. And healthcare in particular is pretty unique in that, especially in the RX pharmacy business, you're not marketing to just a patient or a consumer. You're marketing actually to two audiences. You're marketing to the provider as well as the patient, right? Because you ultimately need the provider to write the script and you need the patient to be aware of it and actually go fill the script. It requires that nuance. It creates more complexity. We find that when we're able to reach both of them with a concurrent and like a similar message, we actually do see like performance goes up. That's why this idea of having a verticalized or healthcare specific DSP and probably make the claim for any other type of technology. It's kind of like a right to exist compared to maybe everything else, all the other categories that can kind of all do the same thing, consumer-based ROI analysis, et cetera.
Well, how do you know if it works? How does attribution work when the call to action is literally ask your doctor?
Yeah, no. And at the end of the day, I mean, pharma is marketing products, right? And they do have product level information, like how many RXs are being written by a specific doctor. So they can see like what each doctor is, or provider is actually writing and increases in those the prescribing behaviors of those physicians.
Right. But they don't know who was exposed to the ad.
Yeah. So in very much the same way that you can create linkages, right, for targeting use cases, again, through the same like certification process, you can actually get and resolve back all this data into, think of it as kind of like a data clean room, except with a little bit more privacy nuance that's specially designed for HIPAA. So yeah, what goes into that clean room has to be super locked down on like what you can do. And so we push impression level data in there, and we can score and evaluate the increases in actually whether or not these patients or households actually end up going on to a script or not.
Yeah, if geo is the common denominator here between both targeting of a consumer and where the prescriptions are coming from, you probably can map it back using geo.
Yeah, geo certainly is one dimension you can do it, but yeah, you can also do it at a household level as well. And again, we can't tell you what household actually went on. That's the whole point of this pretty rigorous certification process that happens. But yeah, and just for background, and this may help as well. Like, I actually came from the healthcare space itself, right? So like, I worked at Memorial Sloan Kettering for a pretty long time. I should say 2 years, a long time, probably my career. And then before that, I was doing a lot of healthcare research. And the first thing I noticed was, all this data is like super fragmented, and so like I developed a pretty good understanding of how to work with this data, obviously doing it in a way that would allow us to build applications on top of it that delivered value for the healthcare side. So the way I look at DeepIntent is you can think of it like the work we do makes us feel good. And then ultimately the people who work here like feel good about doing all the work that we do too. So it's nice. Like, it's a little bit different. We have like 1 foot in healthcare and 1 foot in ad tech. So it's a little bit of an interesting use case.
And if you don't feel good about your day-to-day existence, please tell your doctor. So Chris, we've been implicitly in this conversation, we've been talking effectively about programmatic because you run a DSP. If you step back and tell us from a pharma point of view, what are the most effective channels, or what's going on between, obviously we see a ton of pharma ads on TV, but also how does social play in? Is social as effective? What are the restrictions? How does programmatic differ from, say, direct buys on medical sites?
Yeah, all really good points. I mean, so first off, I would be remiss not to mention that there is this big shift from, obviously linear television to CTV. I mean, it's happening across everything. But with pharma, what's nice, pharma has probably been a laggard and is traditionally viewed as a laggard when it comes to most technical adoption. We haven't necessarily seen that with CTV. They've been pretty forthright, just like really leaned in on the CTV opportunity. It's the fastest growing category on our platform that we see. And it's nice to see that adoption, and pharma's not 4 to 5 years behind the curve on that. So CTV definitely is one. And then, obviously we don't touch too much of the social side, but from what we can see anecdotally, we do know social performs well for especially clinical trial recruitment. That's like a big one. And I tend to think that is a good channel for those types of engagements. But yeah, we see audio is now emerging, digital out of home. It does track and probably index with kind of what you see in the more general marketplace.
Right. That's interesting. What's interesting going on in the market? Is there innovation going on the creative side, AI, other things like that?
Yeah, I mean, so we're pretty heads down on the distribution side. I think the interesting thing is one of the trends that we see is this idea that, actually to a point you just made, a lot of direct endemic buying, or what we call endemic, or the healthcare publisher buying that happened. We are starting to see that shift more and more to programmatic activation. So we're seeing this kind of melding of these like direct buys and programmatic happening within our platform. We just announced a big strategic partnership with Everyday Health, Ziff Davis. So we're now their preferred DSP, and it's a really strong partnership with them that's just building in recent months. So it's almost like we see these walls coming down where programmatic used to be this like kind of, and again, knowing that healthcare may be a couple of years behind, programmatic, is kind of this like, remnant inventory thought of as like, hey, everything else but my premium stuff. We're actually starting to see like deals, like PG deals, private marketplaces being set up for even the more premium, I'm using air quotes, premium inventory that would have been sold directly, right? So we are seeing those walls come down and that mixing happening.
Do you have to compete on a day-to-day basis with the Trade Desk and mainstream DSPs?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's what we categorize as like generalist DSPs, where you have these very few scaled platforms that are, healthcare is 10% of their business. And typically when you're a healthcare marketer, you're working with a team there. And then for us, it's 100% of our business. And, we tend to think healthcare platforms are, given all the complexities I mentioned, tend to outperform, right? And we do see that they have special nuanced, right, capabilities that just go deeper with the clients. And I think that typically is valued. And again, both, there's reasons and why you use one or the other, of course. But yeah, I think what's fun for us is that we've really started to kind of step up in terms of our competitive set just in the last year or two. And we're really now competing, I'd say, with those larger scaled DSPs in a very, very meaningful way.
So we have a running joke on the pod that if a CEO moves to Miami, they're going to have an exit. And you're in Miami, and you almost had an exit. I think the first time you crossed my path was on this pod. We reported that that your company, DeepIntent, had been acquired by a company called Iquiva. I don't know how to pronounce it. And then the deal got called off by the government. So tell us what you could tell us about that experience. Like, what happened? Who's ICVA? Why were they requiring you? Why did the government get involved?
Yeah. So IQVIA, just to give the background on because I know them when I first got started but they're a huge company in the space. When we first got started at DeepIntent, we focused on a very small subset of the healthcare category for marketing, basically programmatic advertising for healthcare providers. And we had a really strong partnership with a company that ultimately ended up getting acquired by IQVIA a couple of years after we started building that relationship with them. And then IQVIA, that's how they got to know us. So we got to know them. And then it just felt like a very, this is back in 2021.
What does IQVIA do?
Yeah, so they're big in like the clinical trials, and they do a lot of data aggregation as well. So they're major, like pretty large company. They have a lot of different businesses, but they've been taking an interest in the digital advertising space. They saw it as I think they still see it as a important part of their business, from what I gather. But again, I'm not saying anything non-public, but yeah, that was 2022, and then towards the end of the year we got, get through a Hart-Scott-Rodino process. We ended up getting a second request and all the fun things that go along with that. And kind of throughout that process, I got some firsthand experience in the antitrust process. So it was funny. I was actually talking with Andrew Casale like a couple of weeks ago, and I know that he was one of the Google witnesses. So we were lamenting over that experience, very similar experience. But yeah.
So they chose to get involved. What was the rationale of the government for stopping the deal?
Yeah, look, they important to say, and I wrote a letter. It's on our website, just kind of giving the context on how we viewed it. I still very much take issue with kind of the facts and the basis for which the FTC took on the matter. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, they were using, also it comes down to market definition. They were using a definition of the market that was sub-selected for healthcare providers and programmatic advertising in these specific channels. One would say, I've heard this in other forums, that it was a gerrymandered market definition, right? And it was a nascent market. Meanwhile, down the road, you have the DOJ suing Google, which I actually do compete with as a DSP down the road. So, as for being a monopoly. So, yeah, they successfully convinced the court that, this should be paused. And then unlike the DOJ, the FTC has their own administrative courts. And it just, at that point, it was almost 2 years. IQVIA and us made the mutual decision to walk away. Just at that point, we wanted to focus on business.
So you'd moved to Miami, bought a Lambo, and now you're stuck there trying to get your Lambo returned and running a DSP.
No Lambo. Can't say I got a Lambo out of it, but no, it's been good. Look, I think Miami's got a really cool scene down here. I'm back in New York every other week, basically. So it's there's a lot to love. There's a lot to love in both cities.
This is a great conversation. I feel like this really bookended our conversation from about 2 weeks ago, where we had DS Political on, because political and pharma have actually a lot of similarities when it comes to programmatic and specialized vendors and all kinds of specialized data. So I think it's really informative for our audience. So Chris, thanks so much for giving us those insights. We're going to take a quick break. We have a big news week. We have earnings reports. We have IAS in play. We have a lot of other things to go on. So we'll be back in a moment. This podcast is brought to you by AdRoll. AdRoll is a name a lot of advertisers are probably familiar with. A leader in high-performance digital advertising for 15 years, AdRoll is a brand you can trust to deliver strong ROI across display, native, and paid social campaigns in one platform. Get in touch with an account expert or create a self-service account at adroll.com/ARI today. That's adroll.com/ARI today.
And welcome to News of the Week. So we have earnings, we have IAS in play, we have a new head of ads for Netflix, a couple other things we can get to them. All right, let's talk about earnings. We had a bunch of companies report this week, Reddit, Snap, Alphabet, Meta, and Criteo. Not going to get too much into the specifics. I think we just want to kind of call out a couple of things that seem to be consistent across the board. Number one, relatively solid earnings from every company. Looks like political spend was particularly strong in Q3. Reddit, for example, was up 56% year over year revenue-wise. Snap up 15%. Alphabet 15%. Meta up 19%. So, relatively strong revenue growth. And there were multiple mentions of strong political spend, which obviously ends next week here in the US. The other thing to call out is AI is like everywhere in all of these earning reports. Snap talking about how they're using AI targeting. Reddit, obviously, they have the licensing deal. It's everywhere when you do a Google search. And I'll talk about like Alphabet and Meta, and particularly want to get your guys' take on this. So, like, number one, these guys are spending a lot. CapEx for Alphabet was $13 billion in Q3, and the majority goes to AI. Meta CapEx was $9 billion, and their stock is actually getting hammered after having an incredible run this year because they said they're going to spend an additional $1 billion that they didn't forecast, largely for CapEx. So, these big companies are spending a ton on AI, but it's also starting to produce some like benefits. So a couple of other interesting points. Sidebar, YouTube is now a $50 billion business, is using AI to optimize shorts. The head of business for Alphabet said 70 billion shorts are being watched daily. It's crazy if you think about
that's a crazy number.
Rhythm. Yeah,
it's nuts
there. Yeah, and we've previously said, Meta with AI, they're using Gen AI capabilities to build creative. So they have 1 million customers using Gen AI for creative. 15 million creatives were produced in the last month alone, and now they're running tests to actually determine when the best time in a user session to show an ad is. So rather than just like trying to stuff as many ads into a user session, they're trying to figure out exactly what's like the highest value moment to produce, obviously a high paying ad. So like really, I think like the actual innovation is happening here, but it's coming at significant costs from a CapEx perspective. When you guys kind of you hear all this stuff and go through it, what's your reaction?
I'm going to do my lightning round because I have a lot of comments, a lot of things. So quick lightning round. First, Alphabet, never bet against their stock. You may not like them. You may not like their products. Never bet against their stock. Second, Alphabet, Waymo is so exciting. I want self-driving cars, and Waymo is doing incredible. I know it's a part of Alphabet, not Google. I'm more bullish on Waymo than any other part of Google. Next, AI. AI really works for these end-to-end systems. Like having Meta being able to generate creative is so much more powerful than a standalone startup being able to create creatives because they have the closed loop of results and they have the customers already. They don't need to charge them anything. I'm really skeptical about a lot of the standalone ad tech AI plays because integrated systems are better. And last, Snap was my call for them. I think it was my call at the beginning of the year for the most interesting public company. It's taking a while and they've had unforced errors, but I'm really bullish on Snap because they have a subscription business. People love the product and their advertising business is starting to turn around. And
the stock's finally popped. It finally popped for you.
I'm still under by 50% at least.
Got it, Chris. What do you got?
Yeah, no, it's nice to see the value accretion. I mean, NVIDIA obviously was the major run up in the, just in the value. And it's nice to see now, hopefully from what we're seeing is that some of the value is being captured at the application layer, right? And I think the integrated comment you made just about integrating the data and, having the measurement capabilities, right? And then just look, data is going to win. It's going to trump all, right? So I think these are the companies that have all the data. So yeah, I think they're in just really good position. Has Meta announced a nuclear deal yet?
You can take over Chernobyl.
That's so funny. Creedier also reported yesterday they're actually lower than the rest in terms of revenue year over year, 9%. They'd mentioned something that a large customer has kind of pulled back, but their retail media business is up solid, 23% year over year. So makes sense. We'll have the other companies reporting later this week and beginning of next. Okay, move on. Big news, IAS. So Bloomberg reported that IAS is exploring a potential sale after receiving takeover interest with Jefferies advising. Stock was up on the news, popped 17% on Friday. And the market value at the time, which is still the same market value today, is about $1.9 billion. For context on this business, this stock is down 20% year to date, while the overall market is up 20% year to date. The closest comp, DoubleVerify, is down 50% year to date. Meanwhile, TTD is up almost 60% year to date. AppLovin, I think that was my stock pick, up almost 300%, over 300% year to date. So it's interesting to see the pressure that this category has, but then also on the other side, some interest in doing something. Interestingly enough, this is also the second Vista company, VideoAmp being the other one that we talked about a couple of weeks ago that's got some interest. What do you think? What happens with IAS? I mean, this whole sector seems to be so ripe for A, innovation, and B, like a fresh approach.
I don't have any comment about IAS, but there's definitely a lot of movement around ad tech companies, both private and public right now, that are not the leaders. You know, folks, either private companies sort of capitulating on valuation. I mean, we saw DeepIntent exit for probably a number that was a lot lower than they originally thought. And a lot of private deals going on. And maybe this is just a reflection like that the growth is hitting a wall. There's only so many places to grow. So consolidation and financial shenanigans are kind of the way you create alpha.
Yeah, feels like 2025 is going to be an interesting year. Regardless, seems like there's a lot of pent up activity here from the last couple of years. So yeah, it's a good, just generally, not commenting specifically on any companies, but yeah, I think next year will be an interesting year, especially in the first half.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be standalone, independent measurement companies, and if IS and DV are part of that set, like that's great, but it just seems to be a category that must exist, must innovate, must have big companies that are independent and not creating their own homework.
It's kind of strange.
I wonder,
measurement's been such a bad area for the stocks. Obviously, ComScore has been a disastrous stock. Kantar's privately owned and for sale. Nielsen's seen better days. VideoAmp for sale. I mean, DoubleVerify is arguably the most successful stock in the space, even though they're having a bad year.
Yeah, I wonder if these companies jumped on the AI too late, like the whole change in the emergence. Like I tend to think maybe IAS and DV maybe got a little bit of a late start on the AI trends, and maybe that put them slightly behind. I mean, obviously we have attention metrics is like another category, roughly the same, like subcategory within the measurement space as well. So, I don't know. I just don't know if they reacted a little too late, maybe some of these trends that maybe put them behind a little bit.
All right. We'll keep an eye on it and we'll keep going here. So there's a new head of ads for Netflix. That didn't take too long. Nicole Pagis, who was formerly of Ampersand, is now the head of ads for Netflix. So Nicole's got a strong advanced TV background, did a bunch of awesome stuff at Group M, was a key person at Xaxis, came up through 24/7. So she's part of that whole group of, the Brian Lesser diaspora that's moved on to do some awesome things. All right, what you got on this one?
I live in the Union Square area. And so my favorite local bar that I might have a beer at after a long day of work in architecture is called Old Town. And I bet everyone who's listening to this podcast has had a meeting at Old Town at some point. So I went in there last week and I try to just sit at the bar and do a crossword puzzle. But no, I see ad tech people every time I go in there. And so Nicole's sitting there with John Widdicombe, who is the head of products at Netflix and products, and who I used to work with at Freewheel. And they're like, Ari, come here, sit down for a drink. And I was like, okay, fine. And they put on this whole act for me where Nicole's like, because Nicole had resigned from Ampersand a couple weeks ago, so we knew she was on the market. And Nicole's like, I don't know, what job should I take? I don't know what's out there. And I'm like, and I say to her, oh, well, there's a big job at Netflix available. Ha ha, funny, because you're meeting with John. And she's like, oh, that's so funny. I don't think that would be for me. And then this comes out, and, come on, people. Like, not only are you at my local bar, but also you're gaslighting me. And, it's not appreciated.
Yeah, you can't hustle the hustler, Papara.
I could have broke the story last week, but I didn't want to interrupt your privacy going to Old Town. Old Town is a sacred place. So congratulations, Nicole.
Yeah, congratulations to Nicole. And the speculation on this one, which we covered after Peter left, was, what direction does Netflix go in with this hire? And how does that signal the future of their business? Where they're going to go, internally? Were they going to go with, another media leader with a strong Rolodex, or another kind of leader that comes from the, combination of demand side and programmatic, TV? So they went with the third. So I think that's going to be interesting, and maybe that signals that direction. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I hope it does. I mean, I think it's, I think for many reasons that inventory should belong and be more accessible, right? And in enabling more diversity and types of demands. I think that would just be a really good thing for everybody.
All right, what you got?
Also, continuing my non-serious conversation. So I wanted to give Nicole a hard time on LinkedIn about it. I forgot her last name because I'm not great with names. So I searched for Nicole Ampersand, and there's actually a woman named Nicole Ampersand out there. This is Steiny.
That's an awesome last name.
I couldn't even find her. So that is kind of an awesome last name.
You have no comment on the implications for Netflix, the most important company in CTV.
No, I'm still upset about this whole situation.
We demand Nicole comes on the pod for some sort of retribution here.
Yes,
Nicole Ampersand or Nicole?
If Nicole Ampersand is listening, you're welcome on the show. She's like a developer for like Nike. She's on the Nike website team or something.
Either Nicole, reach out. All right. Also, speaking of CTV, a company that startup that Ari's involved with called Vibe. They had a cool launch this week. So we actually talked to Arthur, the CEO, on Open Market. We'll post it early next week. But they produced an Apple keynote video. It's 10 minutes long. Each of the execs did a presentation about like product updates and, the future of the business. They had a customer testimonial. Basically, this is a business, if you're not familiar with it, they help SMBs and performance marketers get on CTV with, as little as a $50 credit card payment and, some assets that they can use AI to produce and then deploy. It's really cool. And, I just increasingly, I'm a fan of a lot of these ad tech companies, not Deviant, obviously, mixing it up from a marketing and product launch perspective. This is one that I think is, on par with what the Viant guys did, and just want to give them a shout out. It's all over if you haven't seen it, but if you haven't seen it, we'll link to it in the newsletter. It was well done.
They do a real good job with marketing. They sponsor many of the Marketecture podcasts, so I appreciate that. I think this goes towards my thesis, not speaking for the company here because I'm on the board, but what I said earlier, which is integrated AI. They're selling to these small businesses who in many cases don't have TV commercials on hand. They may have YouTube ads or things like that, but they don't have really good content. And so AI is a perfect use case because they're a closed system from creative through bidding through attribution, and hopefully that flywheel will make sense.
I think it's a great area. I mean, that seems to be prohibitive, even for I see it in the healthcare space. I mean, when we're trying to use, so for healthcare providers, it's a small audience. So oftentimes the ROI of building a video asset in the healthcare provider campaign is just not there, or it's perceived not to be there. So maybe there's an element of what Vibe is doing that could help lower the barrier to entry on the CTV side. Is that, video assets, definitely videos under indexed in the healthcare providers just because it's a smaller audience, so the ROI is not quite there. They end up running consumer and patient focused creative for healthcare providers.
Yeah, it sounds like a great area for DeepIntent to do some investing in.
Could help out, yeah. Maybe, Ari, you can get me connected.
Yeah, I mean, geez, could you imagine trying to convince like the pharma regulatory people that AI generated creative would be okay? Like,
Yeah,
that's a long road to hoe.
it's a long road. Yeah, could be interesting one though.
Yeah, well, one more on Vibe, because so much of ad tech is focused on selling to the enterprise or selling to the agency or selling to other ad tech. Vibe, because of the focus on SMB, has like an interesting, set of challenges that you just don't get when you're, selling to enterprises. So I actually talked to Arthur about this. You got to listen to some of the stories he had with, some individuals trying to game the system and buy TV ads to promote illegal activity or saying mean things. Sounds like they've got like a good creative approval process in place, but there's just a whole other set of challenges that come with, kind of serving SMBs, both from a service standpoint and just from like a practicality standpoint. So a couple of humorous anecdotes. Listen to Open Market. You'll get some laughs. Here's actually one that I saw this week. Publicis let go of, I think it was about 100 employees over egregious RTO violations. So this has been a thing that, a lot of the bigger companies have been pounding the table on. So Amazon, went full RTO a couple of weeks ago, and Publicis apparently had a number of employees that were like not at all sticking to the 3 days a week in office guideline and let them all go.
What does egregious mean? Were they badging in or having their dog badge in or something?
You're in a mood today. I don't, they didn't specify what egregious meant. So I interpreted that as either like trying to pull some funny stuff like badging in and out, or just not showing up and not giving any good excuse for it.
Wasn't there that Facebook story like a week ago about employees that were using, what was the story? They were buying groceries or something?
Yeah, there's a per diem for food, and they fired an employee that made, I think the number, I don't know why this stuff stands in my mind. Some employee making $400,000 a year was spending the per diem meant for food when you're kind of working late at Walgreens for like beauty products or something like that. Okay. So yeah, and doing it like on an ongoing basis.
What was that movie quote? Like, if you're not stealing a little, you're probably stealing a lot. Was that like John Cusack from I can't remember what movie it's from. If any listeners can chime in on that. Not that that's an endorsement for stealing a little, but just an appropriate quote at this very moment.
How many employees do you have, Chris?
So just close to 350.
And then what's your in-office remote hybrid setup, if at all?
Yeah, so we're what we call a remote first kind of policy. So we have a limited size office. We actually just moved earlier this year to Bryant Park, and we don't have a RTO mandate, but I would say we are interested in kind of keeping people closer together. So like we have a good swath of us are in the New York tri-state area. We get together every so often. So we have this policy where I basically have the department leads come up with their own policies, like kind of self-organize themselves. And every department's going to have their own kind of best practices and kind of optimize their own. So we kind of distribute the decision-making to the departments themselves to come up with the best policy. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, we just want people to get together, do the work that they need to get done. And I don't necessarily care where it gets done as long as it's getting done, right? And I think as long as we're part of a team and we have a good culture. So that's kind of been our approach to the whole thing. I also understand there's no real right answer, and something that we're all trying to figure out still. And yeah, maybe some of these companies are taking a different perspective on it, but yeah, it's definitely still a tough issue, I think, in some ways when you want to build a culture. But obviously if employees want to have flexibility, I think it's good. I think it's good to offer that. So yeah, we're trying to balance all the different dimensions here.
Yeah. Has this changed for you and the company over the course of the past couple of years?
No, it really hasn't. I mean, we've seen just a natural inclination, I think, within a set of our employees that want to get together and be together, which is nice, right? And so we give those folks a home. I do think it's important to have a physical identity in terms of office space. So yeah, we just got a new space. It's beautiful. I love it. And I whether you come in once a quarter, once a year, several times a month, several times a week, I think it's good to have like a place to call home.
Yeah, makes sense. Totally.
Wonderful. So Eric, thank you for news of the week, and thanks Chris Paquette, CEO of DeepIntent, for teaching us about the pharma industry and the programmatic overlap. It's a great conversation.
Yeah, Ari, thank you, and Eric as well. Thank you so much.
Ari, good luck in Europe next week, and we'll see you when you get back.
Yeah, and also we have actually a big announcement in the podcast next week, so stay tuned.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.